good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. This is your host, Pop Goblin. Welcome back to another episode of Deferred Birds, and a very special episode, I might add. Of course, my co-host, Mr. Test, as always. We are joined again by the legendary MF Dynamo.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And also another very special guest, one who will be on here quite frequently, LanmanTheLegened.
Hi, y'all.
And I guess we can get started then.
All right. Well, today is a very special episode. We're gonna bring the facts. We're gonna call out the way we see it, and that's, some people might get upset at this, but the right, the conservatives, they are destroying this country, and it's just too important to ignore. You know what I'm saying? So we're gonna start this by talking about some Supreme Court cases just this century that you can kind of know about them and picture how we got to this point. You know what I'm saying? So we're gonna start where it all started. The cursed Bush v. Gore. So you got the 2000 election. It all comes down to Florida. Whoever wins Florida wins the 270. And there's literally like 500 votes separating the candidates. Basically, the results weren't clear, so it's like, it's really close, let's get a recount going. Anyway, the Supreme Court said, fuck the recount. Basically forced Bush onto the country, even though he lost the popular vote. And then, what happened next. Dude got to appoint justices, passed some really messed up laws, like the Patriot Act, taking away our rights and stuff. And, Supreme Court is built over generations. So one election back then had a lot of consequences. I mean, what do you guys think about that the Supreme Court gave the election to George Bush?
I mean, it is crazy, and it kind of doesn't talk about it does a nice job of setting up everything else to happen, because it really was the genesis of everything,
Yeah.
And it is wild how they kind of were able to get away with literally forcing someone into office, and but those are the same people who also demand a recount when the election doesn't go their way. I feel like that's interesting to point out as well. It's just I don't know, man. Honestly, I didn't know specifically. I didn't know that the Supreme Court. I didn't even know that they had the power to do so. That's crazy.
Yeah, I guess I was just kind of surprised that they were even able to just force George Bush upon the nation, and I think it probably just showed how much they could possibly get away with for future issues that had popped up with our nation. You got any thoughts about that, then, man?
I don't think so.
It's pretty strange how we go to the Supreme Court to fix our issues. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, they're literally the main dudes you go to fix things and everything. They're the highest law of the land, pretty much. And it's only 9 old people. Yep, 9 old people that don't have our special interest. Exactly. Bush v. Gore, that started a lot of things, but most importantly is he got to appoint some conservative justices. So we've had a 5-4, now we've got a 6-3, but we had a 5-4 conservative majority already back in the early 2000s. And what they did next, around 2010, when Obama was president, was Citizens United. So that's the thing where basically, there was a law, bipartisan law passed, Republicans and Democrats. John McCain, shout out to John McCain, rest in peace. They made it to where, rich people, they couldn't spend money on ads 30 days before an election, stuff like that, trying to make it more transparent. The Supreme Court said, okay, we're going to define corporations as people, and restricting their ability to spend money is restricting their freedom of speech. And so basically now that's why corporations can buy elections, lots of dark money, super PACs, and, fake news propaganda before an election. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, man, it's crazy you say that. I took a whole course on that, campaigns finance or whatever. I had to do a lot of studying over dark money specifically, and pretty much how it is crazy in a country that is designed to be like free, how the rich and wealthy like are able to have control over that. You know what I mean? Where there is no limit on what what type of money can be spent. How much of it. You're seeing people. I mean, like literally buy their way into like an election. Guys like Mike Bloomberg and people, but not just like by themselves, but obviously also like donors and stuff. Like, it's just crazy that we're like that. They overturn. That's like recent too. A lot of people don't know how like recent that is.
Yeah. What? It was only 12 years ago that happened, and I don't know. You're gonna be hearing me saying that I just don't understand a lot, but like, how is a corporation gonna be put over like an election pretty much, and you can just put however much money you want into it and make as many people get their eyes attached to that when like another candidate needs that money or doesn't have as much money as like said corporation. And I don't know, it just boils down that it's just flat out not fair, I think.
I mean, yeah, exactly. It isn't fair, and it's just like, I mean, they're getting away with it, man. Like literally, like, but everyone knows that they are. You know what I mean? Like, it's public, and
yeah, I do think it's unfair that one person can decide the future of a country for so long, and that there's also nothing that can be done to limit that. I think that term limits would be important, especially for a whole branch that decides, like you were saying, the law of the land.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do agree with that. Like term limits, like the fact that someone can, like, for example, like the Supreme Court, like a justice can, like, have their position for their entire lives, like until the day they die or retire. You know, and like,
they influence so much.
Exactly.
With that decision.
So like, do you know like the exact like thought process or reasoning they have behind such long terms as compared to like a president or any other position?
I think the saying was they wanted justices to be nonpartisan, and they didn't want them to be making decisions based on if they were like running for re-election or some shit.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track.
But it's like, obviously that didn't work because they're extremely partisan.
Yeah, we've morphed into letting money and ideologies into the Supreme Court, where it's supposed to be unbiased and everything. So yeah, like it's just crazy.
It's messed up, and that's so far we're seeing a pattern. Bush v. Gore, even though the country voted one way, they decided to throw it to the other guy and give that the courts were affected by that, and that started a whole conservative kind of like revolution that we're seeing, even though the country's moving in the opposite direction, left. And then this next thing we got is pretty despicable. It was called Shelby County versus Holder. Basically, the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act and said that basically states that had a history of racism, Confederate states or Jim Crow states, they had to get clearance from the government before they changed their voting laws or, through the districts. And they sued saying, since racism isn't a thing anymore, we shouldn't have to get clearance from the government. And the Supreme Court agreed. And since then, you've had crazy, insane, disenfranchising voting laws and gerrymandering to the extreme, and it's limiting minorities' representation in Congress by just packing them all into one district, and it's like, it's messed up. And the Supreme Court was like, they said racism wasn't a thing anymore, so states didn't need to get clearance from the government to change their laws anymore. What were they thinking?
So they were pretty much saying that the states had the right to change that law and everything.
Like, if a state wanted to change their election laws or draw the new districts, they wouldn't have to get clearance from the government anymore to make sure.
At their discretion.
Yeah, because before that, the government Voting Rights Act required those racist states the government would have to ensure that what they were doing wasn't going to disenfranchise voters. And so then the Supreme Court said, well, that's not a problem anymore. Now the states have taken it to the extreme. And it's like, and you know what's crazy is we were all kids kind of when all these decisions were going down. So it's like, you have to really read into it to figure out what happened because, you know, at the time we probably paid attention.
And no one really ever like talks about it unless you see like another minority running for election or just in any position in office, and they talk about like the past and how they've grown up going through the political system. So there's just that, like, some of these are like the first time I've ever heard of them.
Yeah, and also, I mean, talking about like states restricting like voting rights and things like that. I believe it was in Georgia where the restrictions they put on it, like where they're restricting, you know, people are pushing for like them to restrict like mail-in voting and stuff, and that to me is like, it's like all these like little loopholes that they're trying to find any way to like, but I don't understand that. Why would there need to be a restriction on mail-in voting? You know what I mean? Like, it's a good resource, not just for those who are like, you know, physically like challenged or whatever, but also people are just like really busy, and people who want to have, or even like people like college students like us, like I can't go and vote unless I go drive to whatever voting place I have or whatever. Like I have to, so I did mail-in voting for the presidential election, you know, and so things like those resources need to be there, and the fact that they're finding little loopholes like that is pretty crazy. But then even on like a bigger scale, like you guys are talking about, I mean, it's systematic racism, and the fact that they're just like so
hell-bent.
Yeah, exactly. It's wild.
Like, man, did you know that they were gutting the Voting Rights Act and doing stuff like that?
I really didn't. And I do think that, like you were saying, it's just not right for people to not have a say. And like what they're doing in, did you say Georgia? Where they're restricting churches.
Georgia,
yeah,
Arizona, all the swing states.
Yeah.
It's messed up because they can't accept that they lost. So they're restricting voting, making it harder to vote.
Putting the blame on something that is not what it actually was.
Yeah. And that's the thing, people, you know, it's been all out there recently, the last election, how the failed former president
Failed former President Donald Trump. Failed former President Donald Trump. Failed former President Donald Trump.
Wouldn't accept that he lost, and so he tried to overthrow the government, and since then it's all voter fraud. So you know it's a bigger issue now, but it was all made possible by the Supreme Court, the conservative Supreme Court. They've been laying these, you know, putting the puzzle pieces together in this past century.
Yeah, it is wild, like I mean, as we continue on this like journey down the, you know, the far right rabbit hole, it's crazy how all these events are like intertwined, and how all of them were like circumstantial, and how they all like came together to, you know, to make it our country to be at the point that it is right now, in the state that it is, and it's crazy. I guess you want to move on to the next topic.
So the next court case was actually pretty recent. This might have been 2019, 2020, something like that. It was called Rucho versus Common Cause. Basically, people wanted to get something done about gerrymandering. And the Supreme Court literally said, while gerrymandering might be incompatible with democracy, the court has no say in that. Basically said they were cleaning their hands of the issue and they weren't going to end gerrymandering.
Oh, yeah. I remember I was learning about this today because the Supreme Court kind of throws up their hands sometimes when they don't want to like touch certain issues, so it doesn't become precedent. And I guess that'd be a perfect example of just the Supreme Court not wanting to touch things and leave it up to states to fight it out, I guess.
That's literally their job. Like that is what they're supposed to do. And if they have that power, if they've been appointed and they have power for their term, which is their lives, then they need to do something with it.
Yeah, it's their duty as servants of this country, but I guess I don't know. Everyone gets lazy.
It's crazy to see what their priorities are But when something like gerrymandering comes up, they're like, oh, all of a sudden we can't interfere. When they've been interfering in all these other, even more important areas.
Yeah, things that have been precedent.
Yeah.
I want to meddle in.
It impedes or it reverses progress.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, gerrymandering is so scummy. Like, we're gonna cut that part out. Didn't you take a class and had to learn about that at some point, maybe, something like that? Or was it a different topic?
I don't think there was anything specifically on gerrymandering, but of course I could have just forgot. It has been a while.
It's messed up. It's basically how these states can draw the district lines, and they can manipulate it based on voter data to see where the voters are at. And it's basically politicians picking their own voters. Is what it is.
Yeah, or if they have the opportunity to like make it harder or easier for certain districts to vote in, because in maybe like a minority portion of their little gerrymander, they'll put their voting office like on the opposite side or on the board, like just at the border of the district, or just in fact just make it more difficult.
Yeah, restricted to just one drop box in a place that's extremely densely populated.
Or that like you can only use a specific kind of pen or whatever, little things, or the lines that they have, the wait times they make longer, or like even like the times that the voting offices are open, they like manipulate and like change to like do, as you guys were just talking about, to restrict people. And it's crazy because like a democracy can't function without the right to vote, you know what I mean? Like it cannot function without that. And the fact that, I mean, as you know, the kind of the overall theme of this, the far right, is literally undemocratic. It's literally like
undo progress.
Yeah,
this century has been about undoing the last century's progress.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of, you know, it's they're kind of like regressing the progression, and yeah, it's crazy to see, man, honestly.
Which isn't good for our culture either, because our culture is trying to progress and learn from the past and adjust to that. But then whenever you impede that progress, it just keeps things like feeling chaotic, like nothing's getting done.
It's they sorry about that, hit the space bar, but it's just lost my train of thought. Sorry.
No, yeah, like we see like all these protests and riots and everything, so I just think it doesn't mesh well with like everyone is just so volatile at this point right now, so anything could just set us off, like even with Roe v. Wade or even like the January 6th stuff. Everything's just really polarized and it's not good for a democracy.
Yeah, man, and it's literally like I thought that, you know, with like COVID and stuff, that like we would have an event that would really like unite the country. No. And that just made it worse. But the thing is like, you look at the state of the country, we haven't been this divided in well over a century. Like it's literally like we are just completely apart. It's just like two sides when we need to be one, you know. We need to, you know.
How can you be one when the other side is this committed to destroying democracy?
Exactly.
It makes anything that does happen, it makes it people's reaction to it more extreme and divides us more. And
speaking of abortion, that's a good segue to the next court case, the Dobbs ruling, which is, everybody knows about this. It just happened, and they ended the right to abortion. But it's more than just that. It's about privacy. You know what I'm saying? And also, they left the door open. They could use the same reasoning that they ended abortion to end gay marriage and contraception.
Yeah.
Like, they're not going to stop with abortion, you know?
Yeah, it's just the beginning. And obviously a very recent, more current topic. You know, we're talking about everything building up. We're seeing things start like happening now, and they're happening now and are continuing to happen. And I just think it's insane, honestly. It's, to me, abortion, you know, people try to make it a very like complex issue. To me, it's like, it's straightforward. To me, it's like gun control. It's literally like, there is things we can do right now to improve these situations, and like what they're doing is what we're talking about, it's progression. It's literally just
Yeah,
regression.
it's just a hit out on women in general, I think, and it's, I don't know. There's a lot more things for you to like. Whenever you need an abortion, it's usually things other than just like, oh, you got pregnant and you don't want the baby. It'd be like financial factors, or the baby is actively harming you, and so like you'll need an abortion for that.
And they're not even leaving open exceptions for that
Yeah.
stuff. with
It's
these new laws.
straight across the board.
Yeah, there's not much you can say about
Yeah,
it.
that's
It's really like also like what they're doing where I've heard I think it was my girlfriend who was telling me that like a lot of states what they're planning to do is like if you leave like the state lines that they'll have like stops or whatever where they will like provide like the woman with like pregnancy tests or whatever to see if they're pregnant or not, so that when they come back they'll test again. So if you leave and you're pregnant and you come back and you're not pregnant, they'll know you got an abortion and your ass is going to jail. Like
we're living the Handmaid's Tale. Like,
yeah.
It's messed up. We also, oh my bad.
Oh no, you're good, bro.
I was gonna say the Supreme Court was going back to back this year. They had that, and then they had West Virginia versus EPA, where they gutted the Clean Air Act and basically restricted the Environmental Protection Agency's ability to control regulate emissions at a time of record global warming. The heat's insane.
Back to back like Drake. Dude.
Back. That song was fun.
Yeah.
And even then, I remember I did a story on just like environmentals, because it was for one of our professors last semester.
Okay.
Remember? And I remember looking, and it was like the EPA has hardly even done anything. So it looked like it was already corrupt, like during its time. Like I don't think they were actually getting money from corporations or anything. But if a place was like emitting too much CO2 or whatever testing they would do, they would still give them a license to do what they were doing. And it just like seeing them get rid of it was just kind of, I guess,
it was already so weak.
Yeah,
and
it was
they're like, let's
like,
make it weaker.
It was like, come on now. It's like you only had one job and you managed to fuck that up.
It's like, how can you go after all this precedent? And a crazy thing is the Clean Air Act. Well, I'm not sure about the Clean Air Act, but at least the EPA, that was established by Nixon, Republican. So back then you had a lot more moderation in some areas. Like they were like, oh, this is important, to make a law about it, even though he was corrupt as well. But like now it's such a polarized issue. They're like, fuck the environment, climate change ain't real, we're not gonna do shit about it.
Yeah, you just have a list you have to go down, and if it doesn't align, then it's fucking out the window.
Yeah, man. It was like I was just saying with gun control and everything, things that I think should be bipartisan issues or not. And you think like literally the health of our world, what we live on, what we depend on to live and to continue to live. Why are we continuing to put things in place that are very clearly destroying the fucking earth? And not just that, but they're doing things like the Clean Air Act and stuff like this. It's just crazy that they're able to, like I said, get away with it. It's crazy.
And another thing that was recent, I don't have the exact court name, the case name, but it was where the Supreme Court basically said one of New York's gun laws was unconstitutional. And so that's something funny you can think about. They say that states don't have the right to, make their own gun laws, but they do have the right to restrict abortion. So what's with the double standard?
Yeah, what's the disconnect there?
And then, so that's another example of the Supreme Court just being scummy. They're legislating from the bench for the GOP, basically. But the next thing is probably the most scariest case that they're taking up this year. The term just started, so this is what's coming. It's called Moore v. Harper. Here, let me pull this up so I can explain it well. Basically, related to the independent state legislature theory, whether a state's judicial branch may nullify the regulations governing the manner of holding elections for senators and representatives prescribed by the legislature thereof, and replace them with regulations of the state court's own devising based on vague state constitutional provisions, purportedly vesting the state judiciary with power to prescribe whatever rules it deems appropriate to ensure a fair or free election. So basically, they want to give the state legislature. So you remember in 2020 when Trump lost, and he kept trying to say, let's have the state legislatures submit our own electors because Biden's electors are fake, fraud. They want to make that legal to where the state legislature can throw out votes if they don't like it. And look at the Supreme Court's track record lately. You think, oh, they can't get any more despicable. They keep on doing it. So I don't have much faith that they're going to... I think they're going to give them the power. I mean, what's your guys' thoughts on this? What do you think? Based off just what we've talked about tonight, do you think the Supreme Court's going to go all hardcore with this?
I definitely hope that they would really think about the impact of their actions. If you're going to do that, that sets it up for every state to be able to do that.
Reject the will of the people.
Yeah, that gerrymandering is just going to make it normal, pretty much.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because, well, on paper is a big fundamental of like conservatism is like, power to the people, right? Small government and shit. But when they're doing things like that, where they're literally giving so much control to like the fucking states and everyone in power to like govern and to like wrongfully, unconstitutionally, like, take away votes, like, come on, like that is literally, that's a fundamental right, of like United States citizens is to vote.
Because they deem it as improper, but it's our say. That's what matters.
Yeah,
exactly.
Apparently, when the election doesn't go their way, it's improper. It was held improperly, and it wasn't correct. We need to replace it with our own electors. Like, that's messed up, and I feel like that could lead to even worse civil wars that we're seeing right now. Like, there's a lot of societal division and just, it's like we're reaching a boiling point. I feel like that would make, because, the state governments around the country, thanks to gerrymandering, by the way, are basically, majority states are Republican controlled. So that's why a lot of them have been able to ban abortion real fast. And now imagine if they had this power, the Democrats would never win another election.
It's just setting up their rule, basically. They're starting low, and then they're going to work their way up.
And they've been able to do all this by achieving a 6-3 conservative supermajority on the Supreme Court. And that all started, like, if Bush hadn't been given the election, it would have been Gore with a Democratic Senate. That would have been, the court would have shaped out differently.
Well, the power imbalance is going to increase. It's just going to make mostly right even more powerful. It's going to be like when Sidious took over the galaxy in Star Wars.
It's just wild.
But like, there's plenty of more cases out there than what we just talked about. But those were just some good examples, I thought, just to kind of paint a picture of what the Supreme Court's done this century. Because this century, it seems like, as soon as we were born, early 2000, 2001, they were like, let's give it to Bush. And ever since then, it's been slowly putting in the pieces together to just dismantle democracy, everything we worked so hard for,
Yeah, and I mean, we'll be old as hell or long gone before any change starts happening in the country, if that even happens. Just, we're talking about the way this country is going, even though the majority of the younger generation, who I feel like, views align with people like us, are very progressive and stuff, like, despite that, like, we probably won't see that for a long time because of people like, what's the super young, well, not super young, but one of the more recent justices, what's her name?
You got Amy Coney Barrett, you got Neil Gorsuch, you got Kavanaugh, Brett Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
Ketanji Brown?
I think so, yeah.
She's a liberal.
Or not, no, like Republican, Trump appointed her.
Amy Coney Barrett.
Yeah. It's crazy, like, people like her that are just now getting into power have a fucking
She's gonna
long,
be there forever.
yeah, and that's like we aren't gonna see the end of it for a long time.
That's the thing. Trump got 3 Supreme Court picks, and he lost popular votes. Think about that. 5 of the justices who helped destroy the Voting Rights Act were, and like, or like abortion recently, a majority appointed by presidents who lost the popular vote. Bush and Trump, both Republicans. So it's like the will of the people has just been ignored this century. It seems like. What do you guys think about that? Like, it's messed up.
Yeah, it's just a ploy to try to keep the right in power, and as soon as they get the opportunity to, they're going to do anything they can to keep themselves in power. And if that means gerrymandering, if that means fucking taking our rights away, then they're going to do it. There's nothing is off the table, it seems like.
I think that it slows down progress more, as we've discussed, and as you were saying, pretty much everyone in our generation, just all across the country, feel that progress needs to be made, and we're feeling stressed because of economical crisis, inflation, and then nothing's getting done, and now our voices are going to get even more restricted. Something's bound to happen, and I don't think it'll be good, but it may lead to something that could be good.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, societal warfare. It's
Yeah.
literally like you were saying, the next civil war, because we're talking about before, tensions have never been higher than what they are right now. The country's never been more divided, and you're right. I mean, people aren't gonna have enough, and that's on both sides. And we've already seen some like extremism, obviously with the march on the Capitol and shit like that.
Yeah.
And it's just gonna get worse. This next election might be like, it seems like at first I thought like Hillary versus Trump, like that election 2016, I thought like that was the most wild shit, like the most like unorthodox election campaign. And then cut to 2020 with Biden, and it was even crazier, and obviously tensions were even higher. And
Trump did not go quietly.
Exactly, and it's just wild. And then it's Trump's not even the end of it. It's the thing. He's got a whole fucking army. What's governor of Florida?
Ron DeSantis.
Yes,
but they're low key competing for the nomination.
They're competing, but what's really the difference between the two?
God, you're right. They're
like,
both
Yeah.
scum.
And that's only recently that they started competing. It was literally like, I guess like a couple months ago over the summer maybe, that DeSantis was kind of like moving away from his little Trump bootlicking.
It's funny how much it's like, oh, now Trump's got too much baggage to be friends with. Now it's too far. Not after January. The dude destroyed
when it suits him.
He needs to be, obviously he's being held accountable for all those documents and stuff, but he needs to be held accountable for things like the January. Like, he needs, like, legal action needs to be taken against him. Like, that is...
He's literally a traitor to the country. I think he poisoned democracy with his fraud claims, and he's turned the majority of the Republicans into crazy nut jobs. Even the voters, the majority of them still believe majority of Republicans believe that the election was stolen still.
It's everywhere. I mean, we went to school with literally losing their minds in these fucking conspiracy theories and shit.
It's funny because they always try and say, oh, the liberal media or the liberal status quo, they're controlling everything and trying to teach us how to live. But from what we've talked about, it's been systematic right-wing status quo. Liberals are disenfranchised. It's like liberal ideas. You know what I'm saying? Like, because it's more about equality and equal rights and like justice. They're like, no, we can't have that because the right wants to stay in power. So they got to restrict our ability to be a democracy.
Yeah. Thing is, Republicans, they love the saying, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it." This shit's been broke for a fucking long ass time. Like, we need change.
Their saying is, if it's broke, keep breaking it.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's broke, let's take all the pieces that we like and just keep it for ourselves.
Exactly. Just picking whatever y'all like and being able to put it back together however you want.
Yeah, that's just a warning to the viewers. Y'all need to pay attention to this Supreme Court, because they're going against the will of the people. But it's not anything new. It's all been building up to this, and I think less knowledge about it kind of helped lead to this. People need to take the courts more seriously, because they have they're shaping the country into something that nobody wants right now.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and that's what we're here for. I'm not saying that we're journalists, but as journalists, people who inform, like, that's our duty, is to inform the public of what's going on, to keep those in power in check. And I feel like that's what we're doing right now. We're using our voices as citizens and normal people like everyone else. Like, we just want to see change, and like John Mayer,
Exactly.
But yeah, also, yeah, if you guys have made it this far in the video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and all that. I mean, we're hitting about the 40-minute mark.
Share it to your friends.
Yeah, share it to your friends. I mean, we're hitting the 40-minute mark, but I'm cool to keep going if you guys want to. Normally, we stop our podcast around here, but I like going.
I'd say for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, now that we've finished the topic, we've got two guests, like, on here once, but we've got a new guest as well. Like, maybe we could have some introductions. Like,
yeah, I think that would be a great idea. Like I said, this is the first time that Landman the Legend has blessed us with his presence, but this is going to be the first of many times. And honestly, I like this setup, this vibe of the four of us.
Yeah, me too. It's
kind of cool, and like, this one was a bit more like directed towards a specific topic, but we're not just going to be talking about politics. We're going to talk about a lot more things in the future. But that was just kind of the time. But I mean, I've really enjoyed talking about politics and stuff. Like, we should make this out. If you guys enjoy it as much as we've enjoyed recording it, let us know in the comments if this is something you want to see become a regular thing. If we did like a weekly political podcast, and it's just like the four of us chatting shit. Like,
100% agree, and I'd suggest that you read yourself so that you can talk with us about what you think about what you've read.
Yeah, and if there's, I mean, that's what the comment section is for. If there's something you guys don't agree on with us, let us know. If there's something you do agree on, you're just like, hell yeah, make sure to subscribe.
Yeah, for real.
And turn on that notification bell.
Yep, and if you don't agree, that's a joke. We're gonna cut that one out.
No, I don't think we should cut that.
Tell us why.
That's just too serious.
It's too
to
good.
that in.
It's too good.